Welcome. I am Bully. Tonight, I have gathered calamity, consumption, corruption. I'm talking the beast of war, the eater of souls, the defiler worm, the only ascendant Celestine in the triad. It's the apocalypse, baby. Brought to you by the worm. This is a review of Wyrmtide. Let's go. As you may know, I don't do reviews of whether it's good or bad or this or that. I review TTRPG books in the sense of I'm going to talk about what it is, what its intention is. Does it accomplish that intention? And then we're going to get into a deep dive, going to do chapter by chapter, tell you everything you can find in it, and then I'll share my thoughts at the end. Let's get into it. Wyrmtide is a source book for Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition. It, in its own words, offers a wealth of adversaries, tactics, powers, and narrative depth for players and storytellers to elevate any chronicle. You can find inside 12 malign corporations, agencies, and institutions to trouble your pack, 30 worm antagonists, 6 Weaver and Wild enemies, some new adversary powers, 8 battlefields, 2 sample stories, 10 advantages and flaws, 9 worm-tainted gifts, and 3 lore sheets. So, what does that mean? What is this? What's the intention of the book? This is primarily a storyteller tool, it's a source book. It almost is like a monster manual in a way. Things packed with enemies and enemy stats and lore and all that stuff, mostly focused on, you guessed it, the worm. And while there are many enemies and things that get in your way and you have to contend with in a werewolf game, the worm is the most clear bad guy, we'll say. This is, again, entropy, destruction, all that terrible things. This is something that you clearly should be fighting. This is the crazy spirit stuff, just the brutal, pretty metal. This is awesome. This is like the hardcore werewolf stuff. And this is when you just gotta turn it up a notch and throw some banes and corruption and messed up, powerful spirit monster enemies at your pack. This gives you all the tools you need to do that. And it's a lore source book as well. It's intended to be a toolbox for everything worm. Understanding them, how to work them into your chronicles, how to build chronicles around them, and then lots of mechanics, of course, to use as well. This book is a bit encounter oriented, which makes sense because, again, there's not a lot of negotiating with the worm, most likely. And Werewolf, more than the other World of Darkness games, is the most combat oriented as well. This book is supposed to be able to tell you, like, who the enemies are so you can understand them better, their motivations, their cosmology, everything, how they're organized as well. Lots of examples to use from that. How they fight, places to fight them, and the abilities at their disposal. And this book, as I imagine every book in this edition will do, continues the tradition of sprinkling in just enough player character options to whet your appetite. They know what they're doing. Some of these books, you could tell that they're just there to be there. I will say, in my opinion, the player options in this are absolutely the most enticing that I've seen in most other storyteller-focused books. We'll get to that in a little bit. And also, it provides 2 sample stories. So this also could just be a module or a bit of a roadmap if you want to run a chronicle as well. So again, yes, it's like part storyteller toolkit, part lore dump. It does get into some of the worm concepts and some of the things I mentioned before, some of the specific spirits associated with the worm that you may know if you are familiar with older lore. And then part just mechanical expansion as well. New rules, powers, all of that. That's what the book is. That's the intention of the book. So does it accomplish what it set out to do? This to me is an easy yes. It's a pretty clear concept of the book about you want to know about the worm and you want to be able to put the worm in your stories and you want a bunch of stats and powers and new stuff to do with the worm. Here you go. And that's exactly what it delivers. And then some. I don't think you'll be disappointed if that's what you're looking for. And I think it does balance well from like just a combat toolkit as far as just giving you a lot of options, as well as like actually diving into worm lore. It's pretty interesting. I got a lot more out of that than I thought I would, because I make no secret about my opinions on things, and I was on Old Werewolf, and a lot of the lore, I know people are like, oh, people want everything ported over. I'm glad they didn't port a lot of the things over. So seeing that the things they chose to, especially with the worm, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I'm into it. They got me. And as far as like combat wise, I'm not a big combat person, though I'm so good at it. Werewolf the Apocalypse is gonna have combat, and this book is very useful for that. I've been playing Werewolf. I've ran quite a few sessions of it at this point now, and I'm in. And the scraps are fun. They because there's so much weird stuff you could pull from. Specifically, I love the spirit stuff. So like this book is, it's for me. So I think this book accomplishes everything it set out to do, and also does some heavier lifting than I thought it would in the lore department. Specifically, like to dive into like the greater worm spirits and organizations. They have a lot of named storyteller characters in this, and they even give you like locations and stuff like that, and the lore behind those places. So if you're new to World of Darkness, especially Werewolf 5th edition, and new to combat, which this game isn't really a combat simulator by any means, then the book like this is a must-have. I personally really like the open nature of what's possible when it comes to combat, when battling the worm and spirits and things like that. But that also could be overwhelming if you're new and you just want like, give me a template, give me some stats to work with. This will provide a lot of that. As well as if you're like me and you just like making up and homebrewing, not homebrewing, but creating a lot of your own stats and abilities and things like that, this will give you a lot of inspiration and a lot of things you can mix and match as well. There's also a surprising amount of just like clear structure. A lot of stuff you can just take wholesale and just drag and drop into your chronicle, or build a chronicle off of what they give you here. So it's pretty solid if you're new to this. And also, I just can't imagine like a werewolf game that doesn't get into fighting the worm at some point, even if that's not the main focus. So, I mean, the lore, it's metal as hell. It's weird. It should provide some inspiration and maybe some interesting reading, if nothing else. So with that, let's just dive in. Let's go chapter by chapter and talk about what's actually in the book. So there are 6 chapters, 2 appendices in this book. The first 3 have a little more focus for players. Not focus, but are safe for players, I should say. The other ones have stats and things like that that you probably don't want your players to read if you're going to be using them in your game. Chapter 1 looks at tactics from the perspective of various guru with new player options and lore sheets. Chapter 2 deals with the human threat, including worm-aligned organizations. And yes, that means Pentex. Though I will say, while Pentex is featured quite a bit in this, obviously, I have a suspicion they're going to get their own source book. Chapter 3 explores Banes, Fomori, and Black Spiral Dancers. Chapter 4 explores supernatural enemies from the Weaver in the Wild, because they can get in the way too, especially looking at you, Weaver. Chapter 5 provides fleshed out locations to use for thrilling battles. Chapter 6, story outlines using the materials from the previous chapters. And then Appendix 1 has options for human enemies. Appendix 2 has some additional antagonist mechanics. But first, it starts with an introduction. The introduction explains kind of gets you in the mindset of this seemingly endless tide of well, the Wyrmtide, these unstoppable and inexhaustible forces, seemingly unconquerable enemy. And talk about how can one fight the tide? And again, tide recedes, submits to the moon, and Gru are creatures of Luna after all. It explains that while the worm is clearly enjoying just victory after victory, that thing happens where once you start to seemingly win with overwhelming odds, the infighting starts. So it presents some interesting ideas about the worm starting to turn on each other for the spoilers. For these spoils, not spoilers. But to me, spoilers are things of the worm. And if you know me, you know how strongly I feel about them. And that's normal. So after all, the Gru Nation is shattered. There's a book about that. And so now there's all these Banes and spirits, and they're starting to kind of look at each other, eye each other as obstacles in each other's path of total victory. Because much like Gru don't all agree on the best way to fight for Gaia, not all Worm agreed on the best way to bring about the apocalypse. Chapter 1, Fight to Win. This talks about some of those varying opinions on how to best win the war for Gaia. It has some fun, like in-character advice from some famous guru that lore junkies might recognize, as well as their lore sheets. The lore sheets that were in Shattered Nation, those characters have larger lore parts to play in this book. This is also the chapter where we got some of those, the gifts, the merits, the flaws, the things everyone wants a little bit more of. This book has them. And as I mentioned earlier, I think they're the most intriguing that I've seen in any offering in a while from a non-player focused book. A few examples that stuck out to me. There's a Fair Glabro, aka Sexy Glabro, where you don't have a penalty to your social tests. There's Hellhound, where even your Hispo and Lupus forms cause delirium because they're also as monstrous as your Krynos form, which is awesome. There's Gift Form Mastery, where you can pick certain gifts that normally you can only use in certain forms and actually extend those so you can now use them in your human or Lupus forms. This could be abused, so storytellers beware. And then there's Worm-Tainted Gifts. These are so cool, but also I think should be balanced with the social repercussions of it's probably clear that you're using Worm-Tainted Gifts, as these are rare gifts and things that may provoke suspicion when used. These are taught by worm-associated spirits, or spirits that typically don't grant gifts. One is Shredding Skin, taught by a pain spirit. This kind of goes into the one of the classic werewolf tropes of Gru can literally tears their flesh when they shift. So you take, instead of making rage checks, you can take superficial health damage to change your forms, which is awesome. Now the throwback, kind of another nod to classic werewolf lore, is a gift called Bite of the Lycan, where you can bite someone and over the course of several nights, they don't turn into a werewolf, because as we know, that's not how werewolves are made in this game. But they do get angrier and angrier until they become literally murderous and are willing to kill the people around them. So kind of. There's Corrupted Memories, where you can alter the memories of humans, but you do so by replacing the identity, just swapping the identity of someone in their memories, which has such fucked up implications of like, let me replace the memory of your parent with this person, or I don't know, this crazy shit that can be done with this. That's very exciting, and I am excited to use it against players. This Worm Speech, where you can deal damage with your words, also like destroy talismans and spiritual items with it. There's also some talismans, like the Hammer of King Brennus, which was the last White Howler. And you need 4 strength to even wield this bad boy. But does bonus aggravated damage to Black Spiral Dancers, but if you lose a battle to one, you make a Hirano test. Another legendary lore weapon is the Bone Scourge, which is wielded by Zizek, a infamous Black Spiral Dancer. It's made from the skin and bones of a Shadow Lord who surrendered himself to her, save his child from capture. Isn't that nice? And this, of course, has bonus damage and stuff, and also deals willpower damage when you're hit with it. But the most brutal thing about it is it does additional willpower damage if you're attacking someone who's defending their loved ones. Amazing. Oh, and there's Killer's Crown, which is a Black Spiral Dancer talisman. You always have a minimum of 1 rage if you're wearing this. This crown physically burrows and grows into your skull, so it's a permanent fixture. And it's sort of used to show who's like the best killer in the group, because people want it. So whoever's wearing that thing means no one else can take it from them. But if you're wearing that thing, you're a target for everyone else. But also, you can never lose the wolf. So the only way to remove it is to rip it out of your skull, or more likely, someone rips it out of your skull for you. They cranked up the metal on this. This is Wyrmtide. You see what I'm saying? Shit's good. And then there's some lore sheets, including Tender of Banes, where you're one of the ones in charge of a powerful imprisoned worm spirit. There's the Skinner, which is this legendary foe that kills werewolves and replicates their abilities using the skins he takes. Chapter 2, Organize for Annihilation. These are organizations that are obstacles to the Guru. Some are just overtly evil and aligned with the worm, such as Pentex. Others are doing harm to Gaia in the pursuit of something mundane like profit and greed. Just are classic greedy companies that are doing a lot of damage, even though they might not know the worm's a thing. But that doesn't mean they deserve to live. Also, they have nicknames for Pentex, which I thought were fun, like Big Worm, Banecore, Destruction Limited, or just Capitalism. And then they have profiles on these different organizations. The company, their logo, a tagline for the company. They have an explanation of what the company does, the company goals. There's a personality section, which lists specific SPCs. It's an antagonist section, which has some sort of generic antagonist stats for people and banes associated with that organization. There's a stories section, which is examples on how to use them in your chronicle. And then fall, which is a section on ways to defeat them. Some examples of the companies they have. I'll talk about the generic terms, not to spoil anything. There's a security company, a gas company, a PR company. There's a meat company, which may or may not have ties to the Duncerns. And if you know, you know. A freight company, a pharmaceutical company that's in the business of creating mockeries, which are other beast-like creations. And that's this chapter. In this chapter 3, the poison seeps in. This dives into the worm, into a spiritual side of things. This has a list of some greater worm spirits, are the heads of the Hydra, if you're familiar with that. Their associations, their servitor spirits, and things of that nature. Thing I really like about the cosmology of Werewolf is how gray everything is. Well, it's like the worm's evil, right? But also it's a force of nature. It's a natural thing. It talks about that, and I really like that. And the being confronted with that at times can make some very interesting character development moments and story moments that I've really enjoyed in the games I've ran. But they give you the example of like how rot and decay those are natural things, or parts of nature, yet those spirits are probably, most Guru consider those worm spirits. And they kind of give examples, different like lore and in-character opinions on beliefs on what exactly a bane is, what's considered a bane and what's not. And then they get into bane worship, like cults and people who gather around these things, the ones who do know they're doing bad, and they welcome it. This expands on the urge spirits and how to use them in your story, including like story hooks and all that, and mechanics for them, as well as some the lesser Bane antagonists associated with them, and also the elemental worms. So a lot of things that weren't mentioned in the other books that are like big, terrible things in werewolf lore, worm lore, they're back. They're in here, and I think it's a good thing for these specifically. And I think they approach them in an interesting way. And when I say interesting way, a way that's probably going to upset some people who I think don't understand this game. I probably never understood this game, and I don't want to play with, so it's fine. I would love for you to do something else for your lives, but they start getting political again because there's certain things that they just ignored. I think not ignored, but like they're like it was too messy for us to like fix it for this edition. But this book it shows they still got a little bit of that bite. They're still willing to be overtly political as they should be in a game about greed destroying the world. For example, they have one of the Bane cults is the Assembly of True Patriots, who are white supremacists with a secret lodge where they've recovered some Confederate statues that were going to be destroyed, and those statues harbor banes of zealotry called the Hollow Idols, and like it's all right there, and it's great. This chapter also gets into mockeries, which are shapeshifters, but not Farah or not of Gaia. These are created by science and corruption and things like that, including they brought back some familiar things in there's werewolves and apes. Look at this ape, actually. That is too cool to be bad, or too bad to be cool. They also get into some more detail on the Black Spiral Dancers, including some of the different packs and cults associated with them. More stats for antagonists, including Zizak. They also detail some hives, which are corrupted cairns, with some examples. Chapter 4, Everybody is Against You. This explores the other antagonists. And while this is Wyrmtide, that's the focus, sometimes you run into problems with the Weaver and the Wild. And this chapter is about those problems. This also reiterates some of the complications of things not being so cut and dry in this apocalyptic war, and how some things may be serving the worm without realizing it, or doing so because they were corrupted, and maybe they could be cleansed and saved. But either way, in the meantime, they're dangerous and need to be dealt with. Some Weaver examples they give are the Terminus, the Eternal Eye. There's spirits called Snitchbirds and Razor Guards, which are like Weaver spirits that diligently defend anything considered a border. For the Wild, they talk about the Lightless Storm as Frostbite spirits, Dire Wolves, and Black Death, which explores a thing of like, oh, that's a worm, right? And I'm like, no, a plague is in some cases just a dominant life form running wild. So it is of the wild. But still, maybe something you want to stop. Chapter 5, Where to Fight. This is a chapter that gives location examples, really easy things to just grab and pop in your own chronicle, or take some things from, or inspire you to set things up for some showdowns. This is for violence. This has sections for different locations with a description location, antagonists that are likely found there, some tests and options associated with the location, some complications you can add to spice things up, and then variations or how to adapt these locations to different settings, because they give specific ones. You're going to find a jail, a pharmaceutical lab, an oil platform, a container ship, a gun show, which includes stats for an antagonist called a gunfluencer, a coal mine, an environmental protest, an urban warfare training center, and other examples that are more drag and drop, less fleshed out. Chapter 6, Stories. Um, these are stories that can be run independently, part of a larger chronicle, and they use a lot of the materials and groups found in this book. I won't talk about them specifically because there's going to be spoilers, but I'll tell you how they're laid out. They're organized by why the players pack to help you get buy-in, or how to bring in your group to care about this story. The goals that your pack should have. They list some supporting characters, locations, scenes, and variations if you need to change things. So yeah, it's designed as an easy toolkit for a storyteller. Then Appendix 1 is human enemies. This expands on the allies and antagonists section of the core book. They list traits humans can have, similar to like there's a list of traits Banes could have in the core book, which I really like that system. That's essentially how I make enemies in like most games I play, is I sort of take these building blocks and add these different features and traits and things they can do. And I think it's a really good way to, again, keep things fresh, customize things on the fly, and keep your players guessing. This also includes some mention of familiar organizations like the Arcanum and Project Twilight. And Appendix 2, storyteller options. These are gifts and powers for antagonist use only, like Black Spiral Dancer gifts, Bane powers. Like I talk about things you could grab and mix and match and use to customize or beef up your worm antagonists. And you're going to have players be like, hey, can I use something? No, you can't. They already have options for you to have like worm powers. Use those. They're cool. My final thoughts. You probably don't. I like this. This is the aspect of Werewolf I enjoy the most. I really love the worm. I love leaning into the weird. Honestly, this has kind of been scratching my mage itch a little bit with just the weird, high concept, magical stuff. And this book, I think, gives you the best of both worlds, where, again, some of the strongest options I've seen is like, I feel like they sprinkle a little bit of player options into everything just to entice you, which I get it. But this, it felt like the most worthwhile, if that's really what you're looking for. Though, it's, again, don't buy the book just for that, but do buy it because of all the other stuff. It's especially a storyteller. This is a war chest for a storyteller. So many mechanics and a lot of really good lore. Again, I'm someone who I like interpreting things and making up a lot of my own lore, and Werewolf in particular, I think, left a lot out, which I know bothered a lot of people. Didn't bother me in particular because, again, I got an imagination, and I also didn't care for a lot of the old Werewolf lore, and I think they've pulled in some of the things that I feel like cornerstones or touchstones of Werewolf into Wyrmtide. And I think they really could have messed this up. And for me, they didn't. Especially dealing with anything with the Umbra. The Umbra is such a wild concept, and I imagine it will vary and should vary greatly from like storyteller to storyteller's interpretation, which I love. But then you run into the problem that Mage has, where it's really hard to run if you're new because there's too many options. It's a good problem to have for someone like me. This, I think, gives some really good anchor points to worm lore. It's, again, if you're a lore junkie or familiar with old Werewolf lore, you're going to recognize a lot of things in here and see how some things have been updated. And if you're someone who's like brand new to everything and you're just looking for something to grasp and hold on to like start to build around, this gives you quite a bit of that. I'm all in. Like I said, I've been loving Werewolf. I've been running the hell out of it recently, and this really just inspired me and got me want to dive in even more. Which reminds me, I'm leaning into this on Start Playing. I'm opening up more Werewolf Chronicles because so far so good. So if you want to get in on the action and you're seeing this fresh, there's a very good chance I'm going to try to time this where I got some games available. So my thoughts about not just necessarily this book, but in general, I think they've been really hitting with Werewolf, because there were some growing pains and things with Vampire and Hunter even, but I feel like they have the formula down now, because everything they've released in for 5th edition Werewolf has felt very worthwhile. And I have a video explaining like all of the Vampire books at that time and like what their purpose is and what you should get and what you need, blah blah. It's like, it took me forever to get through all that. I love doing it, but it's kind of overwhelming if you're new. This is pretty simple. Like if you want to know, you got your core book, duh. If you want to know about the Guru and their society and politics, Guru Nation gets Shadow Nation. If you want to know about the enemies, the worm, all that evil stuff, you got Wyrmtide. And then if you just want stories, modules to dive into, Son of Decay. You've got like a really good spread right now. And I think they've covered a lot of the big broad strokes. This might be my most reasonably length video, which I feel like I'm not doing enough, but realize I'm probably still talking longer than most reasonable people would. But it's like not a lot to say about this, but that's like a good thing. This is like a very straightforward, like it's the fucking worm, and they cover everything. You got locations, you got enemies, you got powers, and then you got a lot of lore. So like it's all here, chapter by chapter. Like I said, I like the interpretation of it. I like how they lean into the more extremes, but also the subtlety's still there. The gray areas are still there. The complications on it's not as easy. It's just like, yeah, let's go fight the worm, and we're always doing the right thing. They scratch all my itches. This gave me what I wanted, which is some crazy worm shit, but also didn't oversimplify it. And I like that. So now I can point to the book when I'm explaining, hey, I'm actually smart in doing this right, because the book says so now too. Or before, it was just me. This book very much makes me excited for new storytellers. I do what I do because, well, I want to get like just enough support so I could keep justified doing it, and it not be a detriment, my hobby not be a detriment to my life. But also, I want more people doing this stuff. I like sharing these things. I want to see more people enjoy things, actually. And it's really easy to like this game. And I think Wyrmtide will hit right for some people that might have been on the fence after being familiar with the old editions. Check this out, I think. And also, if you have a traditional TTRPG background, I say traditional meaning like you got in through the way most of us get in with D&D, this translates some of that stuff in an easy way of like, okay, I know what a monster manual is. This is kind of like that. This gives me a lot of stats and things to use, and it will be very useful for someone who's trying to wrap their head around the fuck is an Umbra and a Triad and the different levels of spirits and all that stuff. This explains it in a really clear and easy to use way. So I love this for all of you. Me, I'm good. I know no, this is actually was very useful for me too. So yeah, I don't have anything profound to say about it, but it's all here. This is like an immediate, I'm grabbing things and using it, and I'll let you know how it goes, because like I said, I'm gonna keep running Werewolf, and I'm gonna keep the Wyrmtide rolling. So for now, this chapter's closed. Our ritual must end. Thank you for letting me in, and never forget to close the door.